to the Under 21 Convention, Orlando, Florida, 2016. Guys, this is an amazing speaker, man. You're in for a real treat because not only is he the founder of the Legendary Life podcast and a good friend of mine, awesome guy, elite level personal trainer, but he's a guy that has influenced now so many men with his story, you know, his connection and dedication to men and women and dedication to moving men to be their ideal self. This is Ted Ryce. Yes.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right, thank you so much, Steve, for that great intro. And let me just say it's a pleasure and honor to be here today, to be speaking to a group of men who are here to step up their game while your friends are off playing video games and being hungover from the night before. You're here to become the best version of yourself. And I want to salute you for that. So today, I'm here to talk about how to overcome any obstacle or any adversity that you ever face in your life. And I know that's a strong statement to make. And you may be wondering who this bearded, balding, meathead-looking guy is up on stage to be making such a claim. And as Steve said, my name is Ted Ryce. I've been a health and fitness professional for the past 17 years in Miami Beach, Florida. I've worked with guys like Richard Branson, Robert Downey Jr., Ricky Martin. Most of my current clients are CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies, very successful individuals of whom I have the pleasure of working with. I'm also a professional speaker and consultant, and I have a top-ranked podcast, like Steve mentioned, called Legendary Life, where I've been able to sit down one-on-one and speak to some of the top thought leaders, experts, best-selling authors, and more, and to help them get their message out, to raise the consciousness of what we get in the media. And I consider myself very grateful and very blessed to be able to do what I do for work, as well as all the opportunities that continue to come my way. But I'll tell you, my secret to success is probably not what you think, because the truth is, I'm just an ordinary guy. I was born with no special skills, no special talents. In fact, my secret is that I've had to work very hard for everything that I've accomplished. My story is actually one of overcoming tragedy. When I was 14 years old, my mother died in a car accident. At least that's what I tell people when they ask me about my mother. But the truth is that she was very mentally ill, to the fact that my father had to divorce her when I was 4 years old, had to take me and my little sister away from my mother because of the severity of her mental illness. And that car accident that she was in wasn't just a lose control and die in a car crash. She ran a police roadblock late at night, slammed into a tree, and died instantly. More like a suicide than a car accident, although I'll never know what was going through her mind at that time. And when I heard of the details of what had happened and how she died, not only was I full of anger, full of sadness, I was also full of guilt, because my sister and I, we shared every other weekend with my mother. We lived with my father and my stepmom, but every other weekend we would go over to my mother's house, spend time with her. But that weekend, I didn't want to go. I just needed a break. Watching her struggle just to get through the day because of her mental illness, I just needed a break from it. And so when she died in that accident, I felt responsible for it. So when I went into high school, it wasn't paying attention in class to get good grades so I could get into a good university so I could get a good job afterward. No. It was full-on rage mode. I ran with a tough crowd, used drugs and alcohol, skipped a lot of school, got in trouble with the law. Most of my friends were in dropout prevention, but me, they had a special class for severely emotionally disturbed. That was the special class I was put in high school, just so they were like, oh, this guy has good test scores, but he's just a mess. And so they put me in that class to hopefully get me through high school. And I can't say that that wasn't an accurate description of my mental state at that time. However, I did make it through. When I got into college, something happened. I started to move out of the darkness of my mother's death. I started to enjoy the freedom of being able to choose what classes that I wanted to study, choose the direction. I was in control of my life finally. And I wanted to study neuroscience because I was fascinated about how my mother's mental illness, how her brain was more in control of her than the other way around, and by my own struggles and how sometimes I felt out of control. And I thought it would be great. I started getting straight A's in school for the first time in my life. Unfortunately, the winning streak wouldn't last long because when I was 19, just a couple months before my 20th birthday, my 9-year-old brother, Jimmy, went missing. And because of who my father and my stepmother were, two successful attorneys, upper middle class, and just working their way up, nothing but good going for them, so it seemed, it became big news. It became national news. In fact, they went on to meet with Bill Clinton to get a law passed to help to allow missing children's posters to be posted in federal buildings, because up until that time, they wouldn't allow missing children's posters in federal buildings. And what I was going through during that time was just a mess. The FBI got involved, as they do with every missing children's case. I was interrogated. I felt like my rights were violated, even though, of course, that's what they needed to do. And that's what they did with my entire family. And all the while, no sign of Jimmy. No word of what had happened. Leads were coming in from all over the country because of the exposure, but nothing was leading to any information about where he was or how he was doing. In fact, psychics started giving information, and we would listen because although we didn't believe in it, we were desperate. We would try anything. The weeks turned into months, and after 3 months, although it seemed like 3 years, with the stress, the sleepless nights, we finally found out what had happened to my brother. He was kidnapped that day walking home from school. He was taken to a trailer not too far away from where my parents lived. He was sexually assaulted and eventually murdered as he tried to escape after enduring hours of torture and abuse. And when I heard the details of the killer's confession, because they did catch the individual who did it, words can't describe the emotional feelings that I felt. But broken would be an accurate description, and that's exactly how I felt. Broken. Not just emotionally, but physically. I stopped taking care of myself. Financially, I was broke. And spiritually, I didn't know what to believe about people anymore, about the world anymore. And all those dreams I had about being a neuroscientist and making a big difference and helping people get more in control of themselves, all of that was ripped away from me. And I didn't know what to do anymore. I dropped out of school. I couldn't focus in lectures and textbooks when I experienced something so deeply and intensely emotional. It seemed like a joke. And I bounced around from job to job. And that went on for a while until I hit bottom. I didn't feel like I could go any lower. And I needed to do something. And after bouncing around, trying different things, most of which were unsuccessful, not leading to any happiness at all, by pure serendipity, I found myself in the fitness business when I was 22 years old. What I say is that fitness saved my life, and what I tell people is that health and fitness form the foundation for success in your life. And for me, it was a lot more than just building muscles and bulging biceps and abs. That stuff's great. But it was about taking responsibility. It was about claiming power over myself, over how I felt. And one of the most important lessons I learned was that I could be feeling terrible, that I could go hit a workout, and I felt better. And you know what? Nothing externally changed. It was all internal. It was a powerful lesson. And that's how I started to learn the power of physiology, the power that our bodies have over us, because we are living in biological machines. And there's certain rules that this machine follows if you want it to work the best, if you want to feel your best. And not only was I able to do that for myself, but I was able to do it for others, and it became a living. It was amazing. And finally, I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt, this is awesome. I had a way to make money. I had a way to heal myself, to help myself, but also to help others. And that's when I went on to meet all those people and develop a business. And being in Miami Beach, it was an amazing time in the late 90s, early 2000s. And, I was able to also change my body completely from that pale, skinny, unhealthy person that I became after dealing with the tragedy of my brother's death, and go on to, that's me. I know it's a little too much picture there, as some people on my Facebook, when I posted that picture, mentioned. But I also lived the Miami Beach dream. I was training restaurant owners and club owners. It was all VIP all the time. It was a blast. And it wasn't all good, because there were some down moments, especially business-wise, especially relationship-wise, as you heard Anthony talk about his experience. There's some really crazy people that you come across in that type of environment in the party life. But it was a night and day change from what I had come through what I've been through. And I felt like this is awesome. Unfortunately, though, the story of tragedy didn't end with my brother. In 2012, just a couple of days before New Year's Eve, I got a call from one of my sister's friends. They told me that they had found my sister in the bathroom of the house she was staying in, face down, covered in blood, with a pistol laying next to her. She had decided that life was no longer worth living. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, how can one family, because it wasn't just me, deal with so much? How could all this happen? But I started to shift my perspective after a while. I started to embrace the lessons that I learned from the adversity, through the tragedy that I've been through. And what I tell people now, when they ask me, Ted, you've been through so much, how do you stay so positive? How are you able to make such a difference in other people's lives? I say, I've learned a lot of lessons, and I will share with you some of the top lessons today of what I think is important. Not just to get through adversity, but to live your best life. But also, I want to share with you the biggest lesson that I learned. And that is, we all have just one life. We are only here once. There is no second chance. There are no do-overs. And all those moments you've been alive, even though most of you are very young, are precious moments that you'll never get back. And the sands of time in the hourglass of your life, they're always running out. So I want to tell you that my big reminder, that is my big reminder when people ask me about what I learned from those experiences. My brother, my sister, my mother, they remind me that anytime that I'm feeling down, not 100%, that my time is limited. And if I want to do what I feel like I'm here to do, I need to get moving. And I shouldn't stay down 1 second longer than I need to. And that's my story, but I want to ask you, what's your reminder? It's a powerful story. A lot of people tell me that, but we all have a story. You all have a story. Maybe it's coming from a dysfunctional home. Maybe it's struggling in school, not thinking that you're living up to the expectations of society or your parents. Maybe it's something completely different. And most of the time as men, we front, pretend, nah, I'm good, man, good, doing well, everything's awesome. We don't talk about those experiences, but we all have them. We all have the insecurities, we all have the fear, we all have the pressure, we all have our stories. And most of the time, like I said, we all push them down, but I'm going to ask you now to open up to those stories and let that experience, whatever it is for you in your life, create a sense of urgency to do what it is that you feel like you're here to do. Because at the end of the day, life is not about finding yourself, life is about creating yourself. And it doesn't matter those external circumstances. You take what you've got genetically, home-wise, and you run with it. You play the hand that you were dealt. And now I want to talk about some ways that you can create yourself, that I think you should create yourself. And the first one is master your health, and I already talked about that. How you can be feeling down, then hit a workout, and you feel better. Nothing else has changed. That's a way to master your physiology. So is meditation. Someone asked about that in someone else's presentation. An amazing technology for creating a different version of yourself that is more in control, more focused on what you want to do in your life. And I'll tell you, some people feel bad for me when they hear my story. Man, that's a lot of tragedy. I feel so bad for you. Don't. Because there are people without that story who are depressed, who are not living the life that they really want to live. They don't have any major tragedy. They don't have any big story. But yet they feel so bad. And what I want to tell you is the first step to overcoming anything is taking care of your health. Because when you learn to master your health, you'll learn to master yourself. It's critical. And some people don't know where to start with this whole journey. I see some of you are in shape. You're on this path of mastery through physical culture, and that's awesome. Some of you, I'm not so sure about. And some of you watching it online. I know it can be confusing, especially as Drew mentioned in his talk, with all the confusing people saying one thing versus another, but what I want to tell you to do is to focus on the basics. Do you drink water when you wake up in the morning? Do you drink water with every meal that you have? Do you lift weights, whether you do high-intensity training, which I don't personally do. I like gymnastic strength training because it's a bit different, and I'll talk about that later a little bit. Do you do some type of strength training? Are you an active person, or do you go hit the gym and sit on your butt and play video games and watch TV and YouTube and Facebook? Or are you out there being more active? Do you sleep well? Do you sleep long enough? Those are all the basics that you start with. The next thing is master your mindset. And when I think about mindset, I really like the way that Carol Dweck breaks it down with her fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And in case you're not familiar with it, fixed mindset people, they're the type of people who think, I am naturally blessed. And when I do something and it goes my way, it's because I'm so awesome. It works until you run up against something that you're not so good at. Then what happens? Oh man, maybe I'm not so blessed after all. Maybe I'm not as awesome as I thought. You know what? I'm just going to stay away from this thing that I'm not good at. And so they avoid challenge, and they take failure personally. Growth mindset people, they realize the big secret. The big secret is that everything is learnable, everything is a skill, and no matter who you are, what your genetics are, what your home life was, what doesn't matter. If you put effort and time, you will get better, period. Maybe you'll be world class or maybe you won't be, but you will get better. And these types of people, they view failure as just, learning experience. That I tried something, it didn't work. I'm going to have to try something different. They don't take it personally. I don't want you to take any of that personally because it's all a learning experience. And here's some brain imaging of the fixed mindset versus growth mindset, because it isn't just a cool idea. The fixed mindset person, what's going on? They try to challenge, they shut down. I don't know how to do this, I'm done. I give up. Growth mindset person, what's happening? That brain is working. It's rewiring creating new neural pathways, or, obviously I didn't become a neuroscientist, but it's starting to change. It's starting to learn skills. And our brain is plastic. In fact, our brain is plastic. It's called neuroplasticity. It means that the habits that you do create who you are. And a lot of us make identity statements. I'm not the type of person who wakes up early or goes to the gym. Those are just habits. Coming home, downing a six-pack and playing video games is also a habit. And while it may be hard to change habits, you can do it. It's simply a matter of putting the effort in. And, getting a little carried away with the clicker there. So you want to achieve more, but you procrastinate. And I think a lot of you here, you're past that point because you had to overcome a lot of resistance to get here, right? You had to pay money, you had to fly or drive. That's a big deal. But you watching at home, I'm not so sure about, because you should have been here, or you should have been at some event, because that's what really matters. As Steve said in his presentation, it's really about us getting up here, gives you guys an excuse to come, congregate, meet each other, and realize that you're not alone, that there are a lot of you on the same path. So, growth mindset, fixed mindset. The truth is that all of us are a combination of the two. And I'll tell you a story. I was very growth mindset oriented when I came to my body, like building my body and learning how to do that. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I got this. But when it came to the business side of things, marketing, sales, all that, I was very fixed mindset. I sucked at it, wasn't good at it, I didn't want to learn it, wasn't interested in it. So I want you to ask yourself, anytime you come up against an obstacle, something that's hard, are you applying that growth mindset? Are you looking at it as a challenge? And a little bit later, we'll talk about which challenges you should take versus which ones you shouldn't, because you shouldn't just take any challenge that comes your way. Align with your purpose. Sounds a little woo-woo, but it's not. And it can help you make better choices whenever you're faced with a decision of to do something or not. Right now, I'm aligned with my purpose. I'm up here sharing a message with you, a bunch of awesome individuals. And the secret behind aligning with your purpose is beautifully summed up in this statement. When we work hard on something we believe in, it's called passion. When we work hard on something we don't believe in, it's called stress. That's by Simon Sinek, and Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why. And in that book, he argues that it's not what you do, it's not how you do it, but it's why you do things. And it's not airy-fairy, it's not metaphysical, it's biological. It's because we need to be emotionally connected to what we do. Like Drew was talking about, if you're just trying to get abs or lose weight, that's not a very strong why when it comes to staying on the path to physical exercise, physical excellence. When you're tired, you don't want to work out, your muscles are already sore, or you've been out the night before, whatever it is, to get you through. And you can ask a very simple statement with anything that comes your way in your life. Everything is either a hell yes or a hell no. And don't take this the wrong way, because you could say, you know what, driving the speed limit, that's a hell no. I'm going to go 90 everywhere from now on. That's not what I'm talking about. Or saying, you know what, I'm done paying my taxes. That's a hell no. I'm talking about the bigger picture things. What you're studying in school, Is that a hell yes or a hell no? What you plan to do with your life after school? Are you living your parents' idea of what you should do, society's idea of what you should do, or is it a hell yes for you? And if it's not, consider doing something different. Or the relationships that you're in. Are you in a relationship with a woman or with friends that you really don't need to be in, that you're just doing it out of convenience? Is it a hell yes or a hell no? Very simple yet powerful binary approach to living a better life. And I don't think, you may not know your why. A lot of you are in your teens, your 20s, and that's cool, because I didn't know my why for a long time. I'm 39 years old. I've been through a lot. I've had a lot of time to think about this and figure it out. And if you're in that situation, keep on the path like you're doing right now. For you at home, watching online, next time, make it out to an event instead of watching it online. There's just something about being here that you'll never be able to recapture watching it online. And your why will change. When I first started out, like I told you, being a personal trainer, that was a hell yes. You kidding me? But now, it's just okay. This is a hell yes. Sharing this message up on here and all the other places that I speak with. So be cool with your why evolving and being able to adapt with how you change over time, because you will grow. Especially you in this room, you're on your personal development journey. You'll meet people who are the same after 10 years, but not you if you stay on this path. You'll change a lot. And some people just don't care. And you know what? I don't think that's anybody in this room, or else you wouldn't be here. But if you're watching online and you're saying you don't care, you don't have to. You don't have to have passion in life. But we have consequences to our actions. And if you don't have passion in your relationships, expect a mediocre relationship. If you don't have passion with your business or career or job, expect mediocre results in that area of your life. But you don't have to do anything. But certain things lead to better results than others. Next, take smart risks. Risk is such a negative connotation in our society. It's such a negative word, right? Has negative connotations to it. But I want to suggest to you, taking risks is what leads to more happiness. It's what helped me get out of some really bad mental states, bad ruts. And I want to read to you a quote from a guy who beautifully sums this up. It's from a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he said, "The best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile." It's a powerful statement, because too many of us think that, it's cool, just going to sit on the couch, play a little video games, watch some TV. Oh, I don't want to take any risks. I might fail. What will people think of me? It goes back to that fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And another powerful thing we'll talk about in a bit. But something that's really cool, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi was a psychologist, and he studied this state called flow states. And flow states are defined as being an optimal state of being where you feel your best and you perform your best. And if you've ever played a sport and been in the zone, if you've ever lost yourself in a conversation like this weekend, talking to like-minded individuals, or if you ever just zoned in on one of the speakers, you know what a flow state is. However, he found that most people don't spend much time in flow states. So he wanted to change that, and he reversed engineered and came up with what I think is one of the most powerful concepts, which is what you're seeing now. It's called the skills challenge ratio. And as you can see, it's a little complicated, but it's fairly simple. And take any area of your life, talking to women, working out, growing a business, doesn't matter what it is. When your skill level is high and your challenge is low, you're bored. And you probably all know people like that. They started out with a fire in their belly. They went after things, and their skill level got high, but the challenge either stayed the same or it got a lot lower. And they hit that rut. Conversely, probably know people who have very low level of skill, and the challenge is so high that they're feeling like they're going underwater. They're full of stress, they're full of anxiety. But there are people who figure it out, that you need the right amount of challenge for your skill level. And when that happens and you do it the right way, you'll hit that flow zone. And that's where the biggest breakthroughs come from. And I don't have a lot of time to go into it. If you want to ask questions about it, we can talk more about it later. But I want to suggest that this flow zone is also the take smart risks zone. That's how you know which risk is right for you. Is it aligned with your purpose? Yes, but also, is it the right amount of challenge? Because I'll tell you, speaking at this event, I wouldn't have been able to do this 2 years ago. The challenge would have been too high, especially I was asked 2 weeks beforehand. I like to practice 3 to 4 weeks beforehand. But I did it because I felt the challenge was right. In fact, it was a good challenge. I got to step up my game. I'll do it. So in your life, make sure you're taking the right challenges. You're challenging yourself at the right amount. Don't let anybody crush you with challenge. Make sure that it's at the right level. Also, make sure you're pushing yourself hard enough. And some people are afraid to take risks. Some people take the failure to heart. And we already talked about that with the fixed mindset versus growth mindset. But you just have to detach from it. Not outcome independent like some people have been talking about. You just got to say, hey, well, I'm not good at it yet, and own it. But you know that it's just a matter of time before you get better. But taking smart risks is one of the keys to overcoming any bad situation, any obstacle in your life. Circle of strength, so important. In fact, that's in part why you're here, to be surrounded by like-minded individuals, guys who've got your back, guys who are on the same path. I talked to Max earlier, and he was talking about how he felt all the guys he knew in his hometown, they're not on this path. They're not trying to get better. They're not trying to figure out their purpose and follow that. They're just living life, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to intentionally go out of your way to form alliances, to be part of a community. You got to get around individuals who have your back, who have support for you, and help push you forward. People have already talked about the Jim Rohn quote, which is great. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Tony Robbins has another, that you rise to the expectations of your peer group. Cool, and you think there's something to that, right? You're like, man, there's something to that. And I want to tell you that there is. In fact, in his TED Talk, Dr. Nicholas Christakis did research showing how phenomena as diverse as obesity, smoking, emotions, ideas, germs, altruism can spread through your social ties, and forget about the genes part. But it can spread through social ties. And he found that even if you're friends with someone who's really overweight, that can have an impact. And he found even deeper than that. If you're friends with someone who has a friend who's really overweight, that makes your chances more likely. And that's just one thing. It goes for all these other things as well. So intentionally choose who you hang out with. And if you're hanging out with guys who are like, come on, let's grab beer, go watch the game, eat some wings and some pizza, and that's who you're going to end up like, more or less, because it does what our parents, or at least my parents, used to say, like, oh, don't hang out with him, he's a bad influence. I used to think they were so full of crap, right? But it's true. And it's become one of the things that I look back and say, wow, they were right. It's one of the most powerful influences in your life are who you surround yourself with. And you're surrounded with some awesome men in here. So make sure you connect with them. Make sure you don't just let this end here, right? Phone numbers, Facebooks. Be a part of a community like Steve was talking about. And some people don't have a lot of people in their support group. In fact, your parents may not support you, your friends may not support you. And I want to tell you, Again, be more intentional with who you spend time with. I'm ruthless. I have a good relationship with my dad now, but I didn't talk to him for 10 years. And it goes back to another story where, there was some dysfunction growing up in my family, but I felt like he was a negative influence along with my stepmother because of alcoholism and some other things. I didn't talk to him. And that's how much I live this and how much I think it's important for you to live it as well. And that saying that blood is thicker than water, choose your friends. You be the creator of your life and who's in it. You choose, you make the decisions. The last one I want to talk about is be the hero of your own life. And when I say hero, I'm not talking about, man, I'm awesome, I'm the hero. I don't mean that in the narcissistic way, the self-aggrandizing way. We don't need any more of that, right? Not at all. And so what is a hero? I think it's beautifully summed up by Joseph Campbell, who said, a hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. And this goes beyond just having your why, because your why may be pretty selfish, and that's okay. And that may be appropriate for you at your time, how young you are. You need to be selfish. You need to work on yourself. But eventually, you need to think about something bigger than yourself. And there's a whole list of biological reasons, because when you do nice things for people, it creates oxytocin, and you feel less stressed. And that's part of the beauty of having a circle of strength, people you can help out, people who look after you as well, because the people you do nice things for release oxytocin as well. Joseph Campbell, he is the world-famous mythologist, in case you don't know, and what he did was he looked at a bunch of different cultures, the mythologies from different cultures, and he found that no matter where you were in the world, at least the myths that he looked at, there were common themes. In fact, the heroes of stories from all these different cultures that in some cases existed at different times had a lot of similarities. And I know there's 12 things here, but I want you to focus on the big parts. Part 1, call to adventure. Part 2, initiation. Part 3, transformation. Part 4, the return home. And the first one, the call to adventure, call to adventure isn't what you think it is. It's not your buddies. Hey man, let's go out at night. Let's go play, let's go to the club. Let's talk to some girls, drink some drinks, listen to some house music. That's not the call to adventure. The call to adventure usually, I like it, usually shows up as something that you don't want to do. Think Luke Skywalker saying no to Ben Kenobi, saying that he needs to stay for the harvest until his family, his uncle and his aunt are murdered. And finally, he answers the call. And that was my situation with the negative events in my life, with my mother, with my brother, with my sister. And it will show up in your life in a different way, in your own way. And when you come up against that adversity, that obstacle, I want to suggest to you that's really a call to adventure, to become someone different, to go through the initiation, because that you will suffer through trials and tribulations on your path to doing whatever it is that you want to do, if you're really going to go for it in life. And you will be transformed by it too. I stand up here as not the same person as I was before all those events, before I went on that path. And lastly, bring something back. Don't just think about yourself. Think about your family. Think about your community. Think about your country, whatever it is, whoever it is that you want to give back to. And there's a great quote. The best and only thing that one artist can do for another is to serve as an example and an inspiration, and that's by Stephen Pressfield. And Stephen Pressfield is an author. He wrote Gates of Fire. I highly suggest you read that book. It's about the battle at Thermopylae, about the 300 Spartans that fought to the death. He also wrote a book called The War of Art, and in it he shared his personal experience. And in it he says this, and I want you to substitute artist for man, and the best and only thing that one man can do for another is to serve as an example and an inspiration. And when people are telling you you can't get through something, you can't do something, and you go out and do it, you make sure that you let other people know it's possible by your existence, by sharing your story, by bringing something back. And here's a few people who've overcome great adversity and went on to do something great. Richard Branson, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with. He was not a good student. He had dyslexia. He had big business problems too, which a lot of people don't realize. Changing from a dying industry with the record industry and going into a very tough industry, the airline industry. But he succeeded through it. And he's a person that embodies these qualities that we're talking about here. And he lives for a higher purpose. He wants to change the world. And whether you agree with the way he does it, with what his beliefs are, it's irrelevant. He's a person who's on this path and living it. Another one, Albert Einstein. I remember in grade school always seeing Albert Einstein in my elementary classes. He was up on the wall, and teachers love to talk about him, but what they don't tell you is he is not a product of formal education. He flunked out. He did not do well in school. He was laughed at. It was not a good time for Albert. And all those things he went on to do started with him working as a patent clerk after leaving school, after leaving academia. And he went on to become the most famous physicist of all time. In fact, you all know his name. Can you name another physicist? There you go. One other one. Neil deGrasse is like the new.
Richard Feynman.
There you go. So we have two others. But in a non-sexy career path, in a non-sexy, at least not sexy today, we all still remember Albert. And I wouldn't be able to go on to do what I did if I hadn't have embraced the call to adventure that showed up in my life as tragedy, obstacles, adversity, hardship, depression. And let's talk about the most important person here, which is you. We all have a story. We all have a journey. We're all on a journey. And I want to ask you, will you embrace the call to adventure when it comes? Will you go through the process of initiation? Will you let it transform you? And will you come back and bring something back for others to either serve as an example or to educate others to make a difference? And if you do that, what type of difference could you make in your life, in your family's life, in the community that you live in the country that you live in, or even the world? Thank you.
Give it up for Ted Ryce. Who's got questions?
Could you talk a little bit about gymnastics training? You said you're going to go into that a little bit. Something I'm interested in.
Sure. Yeah, it's very different than what Drew was talking about, or many other ways of approaching physical culture, physical development. And it's a way, if you go back to the skills challenge ratio, it's a more athletic way of approaching exercise. Did you have a specific question about it, or?
No, not specific. Just, I don't know, whatever you have to say about it.
Yeah, I think it's a way. Drew made some great points about exercise, and I think they're very valid, but I also think there are other valid ways to approach exercise, even though I'm 100% with him on the stress recovery idea. But if you look at a gymnast, they don't work out to get big buys, man. Or, my quads look, my vastus medialis looks a little small, bro. Really need to do those. It's not like that. They go in there to master skills, and as a result, they have a very strong, powerful, and muscular body. So as a resource I can give you, gymnasticbodies.com is, I think, the top guy. However, that's not like getting your black belt in Muay Thai, which probably takes a couple years. It's more like getting your black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which takes like 9 or 10 years. But it's an amazing journey, and it gets you into that flow because there's this danger involved when you're doing a handstand or doing some of the other exercises.
Hey man, thank you for your talk. Could you talk a little bit more about getting in the flow state, staying there? For me personally, exercise is a big one. I know that if I start my day like that, then it's usually uphill from there, but or downhill, but no, uphill. It's good, is what it is. But yeah, just staying in the flow state, like being at peak performance.
Sure.
Yeah.
How to get there, or?
Yeah, stay there.
Yeah, how to get there and stay there. I think that's the big question. And I don't know if I'm the one to really answer that, but I will tell you what I do know. And at first, I never even knew there was a name for flow. All I knew, which I didn't mention, is I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a long time. I got a brown belt. I'll probably never get my black belt at the rate I'm going now because of my injuries. But I felt like I was in flow. But I also felt that when I played music, when I played in a band, and I also felt it when I did some other things. And I didn't even know there was a word for it. So it really is about finding the triggers for you. There's something called the flow cycle, which is the process that you go through getting into flow. There are flow triggers, which are more what you're talking about. You can't stay in flow because what the research shows, and I'm no expert on this, but it's a dump of neurotransmitters and hormones all at the same time that give you that in the zone feeling. That is metabolically expensive to do, so you can't stay there. And if you read the book Rise of Superman, which you should totally read by Steven Kotler, he goes into that and he uses extreme athletes as the model. And those guys, he credits flow states with them being able to do what they do. Because if we look at sports, right, like basketball, conventional sports, there ain't a lot going on. There's just some big, powerful, genetically gifted individuals doing their thing with more rules imposed on them every year. However, in extreme sports, guys are breaking world records on the regular, doing amazing stunts that we thought were impossible. So check out that book. But also for the flow triggers, what I can tell you is that there's environmental flow triggers. There are physical flow triggers. You have to find out what does it for you. And exercise, you said, helps do that. Absolutely. Look for more challenging ways of exercise, because I don't know how much a flow state you get from just doing bicep curls in the mirror. However, if you do a handstand, if you're working on going from like a L sit to a handstand on some parallettes, now that's something different, right? There's danger involved. You could hurt yourself doing this, or bench press. That's why I don't do that stuff. It's boring to me. So look at that. Also traveling, because you take yourself and put yourself in a novel environment. So make sure you travel. I mean, didn't you feel it a little bit while you were here, right? Like at first you're a little like, oh man, who are these guys gonna be, or who's gonna be talking? So put yourself in novel situations that challenge you socially, challenge yourself physically. That's what I would say.
Could you tell us a story of how you built your business? You've got some big names on your website and people you've coached. Could you maybe tell us how you met those folks? Did you go door to door? Did you knew somebody that knows somebody? How did all that get started for you?
The celebrities?
Yeah, Ricky Martin or
Okay.
Robert Downey Jr.
All right. Rule number 1, move to a place that has celebrities that live in it or frequent it. I live in Miami Beach. If you live in, I don't know, Miami, Ohio, you're probably not going to have the same opportunities, right? So that's number 1. But beyond that, I'll tell you, become the type of person that attracts those types of people, because they didn't get, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Sure, you got to be an expert at what you do, but also they asked me to train. Ricky's manager met me in the gym and asked me, hey, I have a famous artist that I want you to train. Like, are you interested? He didn't even tell me who it was, and there was this process of getting there. And being the type of person that they could trust that wouldn't sell their information or snap pictures and sell them to TMZ or whatever those people worry about. Also with Richard, I mean, I trained, it's about creating your networks. I trained a guy who has a luxury salon in Miami Beach who knows the niece of Joan Branson. I met her and trained her, then I trained Joan, eventually met Richard. So it's through creating these networks and by becoming the type of person with integrity, trustworthy, you know, and I'm not talking about being a nice guy either, because I'm not so nice at times. But people know that, they know where they stand with me, they know that they can trust me, and you know, they know that I'm not going to do something shady. So that's what I would say. But it only works if you're in a place with those types of people. Are you a personal trainer, by the way? Oh, okay, yeah.
So Steve made some comments earlier about how, going back to the sexual world real quick, where moment's starting to get hot, you got a girl back in your room, and all of a sudden your rational brain just, it turns off. This is game on. This is the only thing I can think about. Condoms, whatever. This is game. How, from the opposite side of that, when your mother is killed, when your brother is killed, and then your sister kills herself, how, like, when those times, how do you not put yourself in a situation? I guess what I want to say is, it sounded like your sister succumbed to the previous two incidents, and how do you use your rational brain in those instances?
Yeah, great question. And I would tell you that it goes back to what I said about mastering your physiology. It's a great question, by the way, especially when you mentioned my sister seemed to succumb to it versus me. And we didn't share the same mindset. It's a huge deal. We didn't share the same level of care, self-care when it came to physical health. And I don't think everybody needs to do that, but you have to do what works for you. And for me, I needed to focus on it a lot. So I look like I have it all together, but it's because I've created it that way. And but you also have to go through the grieving process. And you also have to feel the emotions. Fortunately, I was never brought up with a dad who was like, Ruben, don't cry. You know, it's complete BS. You know, those guys are weak and not fully grown men, in my opinion. So I was allowed to feel my feelings and do what I felt was right. And I just kind of, you know, I kind of went through it. But just go back to that mastering your health. What you're talking about, let me finish up by saying, what I hear you talking about in a physiological kind of cold and emotionally detached way is, how do you reduce the stress level so you can think straight? And it comes back to that meditation. Headspace app is awesome. I'm not a guy who's like, I'm just going to sit and meditate. I'm not like that, right? Headspace. It's an app. It's a great program. They give you like 10 days free. It's a little weird, but it's only 10 minutes. And if you go through it, you feel different afterward. That's a technology you can use to lower stress. Exercise is another way. There's also supplements you can take. Magnesium is a supplement. I like to take oral magnesium as well as topical magnesium. That's a way to change your physiology, to get rid of the stress chemicals, the catecholamines that are coursing through your body that are making you feel like, you know, like so stressed. So that's another way. Also making sure you get good quality sleep as well. Sleep is huge. In fact, in October, I'll be doing a whole talk on sleep. So that's what I would say.
Your story of overcoming, your journey is, it's amazing. Far less have not overcome far less, or far more have not overcome far less. I'm interested in your comment of what you can share with maybe one individual more that may be sitting here saying, oh yeah, well that worked for you, but you don't know my situation, and I'm going to go home to my situation. Is there a few highlights, a few points of what we could do, what someone could do when they go home and they leave the energy of this event and they leave the energy of this social support, and now they're back in their journey?
Michael, thank you so much for saying that. Although I don't like to I share this story because it gets people's attention. I don't like to, again, it's not about self-aggrandizement or narcissism for me, but it's a fantastic question. So you're here, you're feeling awesome, you're like, whoa, but I heard your story and I'm gonna go back to my house and it ain't gonna be cool. And what I would tell you is make a list, an action list of the top 3 things that you're gonna do when you get back home to start taking control of your situation. Maybe you're already working out and you're like, man, I work out. And it works a little bit, but then I'm back in the same situation. And it's a very general question, but I will say this. If you're going back to a situation where you're surrounded by parents who, in spite of their love for you and care for you, are kind of messing you up, kind of being in your way, then you need to take yourself out of that environment. I would say environment is huge. The people you hang around with is huge. And you may not even be able to focus on all the other stuff if you're in a bad environment. Get out of that, but make an action plan. Maybe that's not the right one for you either. Make an action plan and ensure that you do it. And get an accountability buddy. You know, some people laugh at that idea, but I train guys who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm their accountability buddy. Because they go and crush it in business, but they're not crushing it with their physical health. We can all use someone to hold us accountable. Joining a community like Steve mentioned is another way. People that you can talk to, people that have your back. Make a list, have someone hold you accountable for it, and take action.
Hey, so one of the speakers had mentioned accountability also, and having an accountability buddy or friend, where like you set up a goal, and if you don't meet it, then there's some price to pay or some kind of associated, just like something. But like, what are tools that you use, other things to keep your friends and your the people that you mentor accountable?
The only coaching that I do is health and fitness. I don't do like dating, or I don't really do men's coaching or anything like that. I do health and fitness coaching, and in that way, I use an app, and I make sure we're in contact. So I don't know if it's super relevant to you, but I have people signed up to this app where they have to report on what they do, and I see what they do, and either they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're not logging it, and I get on their case about it and say, hey, what's up? I see your numbers are down. I see you haven't gotten your 10,000 steps in. What's going on? And that's one way. Setting a regular date where you talk to someone, setting up a meeting where you talk to someone is another way. Meet every 2 weeks. Hey, here are your goals. How are you doing with them? Oh man, I haven't taken action. Well, why not? And then I'll be honest, some people aren't ready yet. Stephen Pressfield, that book, War of Art, when I was trying to build my business, I did well, but I was trying to take it to the next level, and I was so frustrated, but I wouldn't do the things I knew I needed to do. I didn't study market. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I put in the War of Art, and I listened to it over and over and over and over again until I finally got pummeled by his message so badly that I was finally inspired into action. And I do a podcast. It's about that. There's some other great podcasts. Steve has a great podcast, but find something where you can regularly motivate yourself. That's what I would say.
So you went from being a personal trainer to professional speaker, podcaster. What was that like? That's the dream of a lot of guys. Like, how can I have my own podcast, blog? And it was, I feel, a big transition career-wise for you. So how did that work? How long have you been doing it? And what are some things for guys to keep in mind?
Sure. And I'm not fully out of personal training. I still do it. But it's at a different level now. It's a side of my business, and my main focus is speaking. And it started with podcasting. It started with me having a message and a mission. Because if you're just out there, you're like, man, how can I get people to buy some shit, you know? Oh, that's not going to work. A lot of people, right? But people do it all the time. You're like, hey, man, come on. You know, you got to have a mission. You got to have a message. And you got to share that message in a way that connects with people. And I've been doing health and fitness for 17 years. I have a lot of education on it. I also have a lot of experience in it and a lot of opinions on it as well. And I wanted a medium where I could share that and reach more people. And you can blog, and I'm a decent writer, believe it or not, but it takes me forever to write one article. And although I used to be a really kind of shy, awkward dude, believe it or not, some people don't think that, but it still even comes out at sometimes. You know, I just felt interviewing people was the way to do it. And by the way, that's a huge way of not only increasing your network, like we talked about earlier, but developing your communication skills. And it's changed my life. As far as a speaker, well, I was speaking on the podcast. I got better at it. But I took improv acting classes. I took Toastmasters. I offered to give speeches. I got a Toastmasters man in the back, all right? And I did what it took. And I paid money to go to courses. I took a public speaking course. And then I started putting it out there. I started saying, hey, I'm a professional speaker. This is what I do. And I did my first keynote this year in April. So, and I have a lot of other opportunities coming up this year and next year. So it's a time. It takes time. It takes a lot of work. But yeah, it's about following that process, striving for excellence, but also, like what I said about being the hero, having a message that serves other people and not just yourself.
Hey man, you have a great looking slideshow. I was wondering, do you have a background in design or anything like that, or did you hire someone?
Yeah, you know, thanks. I'm pretty awesome, and yeah, I didn't put it together. Giselle is the other half here. You just made her entire month. So yeah, and that's another thing. I wouldn't be able to do that. I would not be good at it. And, you know, partnering up with someone, getting someone to do that. And Giselle and I were partners in more than one ways. And she handles the marketing side. And we do this together. We share the business and you know, she does what she's great at and I do what I'm great at.
All right, let's give it up for Ted Ryce. Awesome stuff, man.